If you play traditional Scottish or Irish music, buying the wrong mandolin could be an expensive mistake. After 35 years of building mandolins, bouzouki, tenor guitars, working for a lot of years for Stefan Sobell and the last 20 years working for myself, I can tell you the Celtic mandolin does exist. It's not just a marketing term. They behave, the look and the sound very different from their American cousins. Get yourself onto a forum. People love arguing the toss. What is a Celtic mandolin? Does it even exist? Some people will tell you it's got to be a certain shape, it's got to be made of certain woods. Some just say it's a marketing term, it doesn't mean anything. But if you play traditional Scottish or Irish music, these differences can matter more than you think. Now, by the end of this video, you're going to have a much better idea of what people are referring to when they say Celtic mandolin. Let's start with what we know. Bit of history. So in the 60s, right across the Western world, you had a bit of a folk revival going on. But in the 70s, you had bands like the Dubliners, Fairport Convention, Planxty, the Battlefield Band. They were all using the mandolin in some form. So what did they use? They used whatever was to hand. So you'll see people using Neapolitan mandolins, factory mandolins, cheap and cheerful. Now all of these mandolins can be nice in the right context. And that context is usually in the studio or at home. But outside of that, those two areas are not ideal for traditional Scottish or Irish music. Enter Stefan Sobell, the man who trained me. Probably the most influential builder of octave mandolins, Irish bouzouki, Celtic mandolins has been. He created what we now recognise as a Celtic mandolin. So what do I actually mean? Let's break it down. First, the shape. Now if a Gibson mandolin is shaped like a shallot, your Celtic mandolin is shaped like an onion. The Celtic mandolin has a sort of rounder, softer shape without all the pointy bits and the curly bits. Now the soundboard, on your better quality Celtic mandolins, they are carved just like they are on a Gibson mandolin or just like they are on a violin, but the carving is different. Often on a Gibson you'll see a sort of deep recurve around the edge. And that's from the violin world. The Celtic mandolin usually isn't made like that. The arching is different because we're going for a different sort of sound. But the better quality Celtic mandolins have got a carved top. Back and sides. For many years, Sobells are miniature bouzouki. So they had Indian rosewood back and sides, and the soundboard would be European spruce or Western red cedar. I can remember, mid to late 90s, there was a timber dealer just about 5 minutes away on my bike from Stefan's workshop, Hexhamshire Hardwoods, run by a very nice chap called Richard Ferguson. And I used to sometimes go down and see what he had in. And on one occasion, Richard had just got in a whole load of planks of bird's eye maple from America. It was really lovely stuff. And I started nagging Stefan to get some. Let's try it for a mandolin, because we'd made lots of mandolins out of rosewood. And Stefan had made some maple ones, but we hadn't made many. But the time I was there, it was all Indian rosewood, occasionally coca polo. So we made a bird's eye maple back and sides mandolin. I think it was one of the smaller ones, and it was magnificent. We both thought this was a great improvement. The soundhole, again, this comes from the Sobell design. The most popular design is an oval or a sort of triangular shaped hole at the end of the neck. Same place you get it on an Irish bouzouki, or the same place you get it on a guitar. Though in the last 10 years I've started making what I call my Celtic F mandolin, which is a Celtic mandolin but with F holes, because I wanted a little bit more projection and a bit more bark that you get from an American mandolin. You can't pin it down just to one thing. It's a kind of constellation of design choices that come together and we'll call it a Celtic mandolin. So if you want a quick rule of thumb, yeah, it's going to be an onion-shaped body. It's going to be a carved top, but with gentler arching than what you would see on an American mandolin. Most Celtic mandolins have an oval or a soft triangular shaped soundhole. The back and sides can be pretty much any material, carved or curved or flat. The main difference really comes down to the sound, and they're voiced for a sweeter top end and more sustain in the bass than a traditional F-hole American mandolin. So the better Celtic mandolins have this strong, sweet treble. It's not the thick treble that you'll get on a F-hole Gibson. They don't have that bark or the bite that you'll get from a Gibson. They've got a sort of shimmer instead at the top. A sparkle and a shimmer. A good one can still carry in a session. You'll still hear it above everything else without the need to overplay. And if it's a slower tune, you've got the sustain in the bass end, which you can use as a drone. If you watch the clips at the end of this video, you'll get a good idea of the sort of thing I'm doing for my clients. So I've been talking for a few minutes. It is about time I contradicted myself. So there is this thing, the Celtic mandolin, but there are still some very good players who actually prefer the American bluegrass mandolin. Luke Plum, he plays a Gilchrist. They're magnificent mandolins. You've got Simon Mayer, plays a model Vanden. That's a great mandolin. And especially if you come from that bluegrass world, you may well prefer that sort of instrument. But the majority of people who play traditional Scottish and Irish music prefer the sort of sound you get from a Sobell or a Forster or one of the other better Celtic mandolins. They just seem to suit the music in the same way that a Macaferry suits gypsy jazz. Years ago, I wrote a blog post. It's on my website. I emailed a load of musicians, Luke Plum and Simon Mayer, and a few others, and I asked them a few questions about why they used what they did. I think the best line came from Dave Swarbrick, the late Dave Swarbrick, as he is now. And he said, I think the term Celtic mandolin stinks. Fair enough, Dave. Whether you like the term or not, there is a sonic tradition now, and I'm part of it. And in my experience, most players, they know what they prefer. So I've had over 35 years now of making these things. What do I think? Well, you've got a few options. The sort of flat top, cheap and cheerful mandolins, they are what they are. You'll occasionally get a good one. Most people who've got one think they've got a good one, but you don't see many at sessions. You know, that's the thing. That's the test. Do you take a mandolin to a session? And the answer is usually no. Great for playing at home. They're nice for recording, but you just kind of hear them when you're playing in a room full of fiddles and banjos. Another thing that you'll see from time to time is like a really vintage Gibson A model, because they're often very nice mandolins and they're not that expensive. These are over 100 years old, some of these Gibsons that I've seen. They're hit and miss. They all look lovely. They can all sound quite nice, but some of them just haven't got any power. Nice in the studio, nice when you're playing at home, and not much use in a session. From time to time, you'll see a really nice, high quality F-hole style mandolin, better Gibson or a Gilchrist or one of the other makers. Yeah, they'll do the job. They can project really well. It's not necessarily the right sound for the music, but the projection's there. You'll be able to hear yourself. But for me, the sweet spot is what I'm doing, is the sweet singing treble, bit of sustain in the bottom end. Not as woody as an American mandolin, but brighter, and enough projection that you can hear yourself and others can hear you. So if you mostly play fiddle tunes, hunt one out. So what's next? Well, after I've finished yapping, you can see some footage of people playing my mandolins. I hope you enjoy the music. But I've just recently finished a batch of mandolins, and I've videoed most of the process. I had those videos up on Instagram. I've compiled them all, put a bit of narration on to tell you exactly what I'm doing whilst I'm doing it. So I've got a link to that, which you can either get below or it'll be in the corner of this video. Click on that and I'll see you in that video.
you.